So when people find out that I'm from New York City, they go, wow, what is it like to grow up in New York City? And unfortunately, I don't know, because I have nothing to compare it to. It's all I've ever known. But I do know that kids in New York City, they grow up a lot faster. They become independent at a lot younger age, because they're not dependent on people to drive them around. So at like 10 years old, we're taking the bus, we're meeting our friends, walk to the movies, go to the park. But this kind of independence does have some drawbacks. It's a lot harder to rebel when you have so much freedom to begin with. Like you have to try harder, you have to push the envelope a little bit more. And I always needed to rebel. I mean, I wanted to be a rock star. I needed to separate from my parents and build my own identity and begin to become a grown-up. And well, I didn't really know about any of that. I just knew that being a badass and getting away with it felt pretty great. So this was how, one August night in 1985, when I was 13, my friend Giggly Jessica and I came up with the ultimate sleepover plan. Now, I had a lot of friends named Jessica, so they all had nicknames, and Giggly Jessica got her name because we would just laugh together all the time. She lived near me on Central Park West. We had a lot of sleepovers, but this one night, I told my parents I was sleeping at her house. She told her mom she was sleeping at my house, and we met instead in the lobby of my building. And we brought sleeping bags and pillows, we brought a notebook with 2 pens, and we brought 5 cans of Budweiser, which I stole from my parents' fridge. So I thought that was pretty badass. So we snuck past the elevator men, and we went to the stairway, and we climbed 18 flights of stairs up to a terrace, a private terrace, and then we slinked along the terrace like the Pink Panther, like right by somebody's living room windows. And there was this rickety fire escape ladder at the end. So we climbed the fire escape with one hand, because we had all our stuff in the other, and we tried not to glance down at the courtyard 18 stories below. And then we flung our stuff up over and climbed up onto the roof, 19 stories in the air, and this is where the ultimate sleepover began. So I rolled out my sleeping bag, I pulled out a Budweiser and popped it open like a total badass, and I started drinking it, feeling very satisfied with myself. And then very quickly, about halfway through the can, suddenly I was desperate to go to the bathroom. This was probably one of the first beers I ever had, so I didn't realize how quickly beer makes you pee. And here was really the big snare of our genius plan, is neither of us could go home until the next morning, because we both told our parents we were sleeping at the other person's house. So there was this utility closet on the roof, and we opened the door, and there was a giant wheel inside, about 5 feet in diameter, pulling this huge cable up and over. It was the top of the elevator shaft for the building. When you gotta go, you gotta go. So I put 1 foot inside the closet and 1 foot on the door jamb, just in case the door shut me in, and I pulled down my pants and I squatted awkwardly, and I peed, and it was such a relief. And then it was genius, because when I was done, we just closed the door and we didn't have to smell it or anything. So, problem solved. We moved on to the next part of the sleepover. So Jessica pulled out the notepad and the pens, and it was time to start an orgy list. Now, an orgy list does not actually have anything to do with an orgy, or even sex for that matter. An orgy list was a game where you take turns claiming cute guys and you add them to your list. Like, for example, me, John Taylor. Giggly Jessica, Simon Le Bon. Me, Kirk Cameron. I mean, this was 1985, remember? Giggly Jessica, Michael J. Fox, and so on. And so there was also a rule where you could choose, first of all, you could pick living or dead people, didn't matter. And you could also choose what time in a guy's life you were choosing. So for example, young undead Elvis was very popular with the orgy list system, as was Matt Dillon with long hair in the movie Little Darlings. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, and then it really got interesting about 45 minutes in when the bargaining started. So, for example, if Jessica had Judd Nelson and I wanted him, I could offer, say, Ralph Macchio in trade. Or, if she decided Judd Nelson was too valuable, which, I mean, duh, obviously, she would demand 2 people from my list, and I would have to go back and work that out. So, the thing about an orgy list was it was this great feeling of control and sort of ownership, you know, it was very intoxicating when we were 13. Well, not as intoxicating as the now warm Budweiser I was drinking, but, you know, still somewhat intoxicating. So once we were done with that, it was time for the main event of the ultimate sleepover. Now, Jessica's parents were divorced, so she lived with her mom near me in New York, and then she spent the summers with her dad in South Bend, Indiana. And in South Bend, she had some older step-siblings, and then they had friends. So she was always learning things when she went to South Bend, and she would come back and share them with me. Well, this summer, Jessica had been taken by these older siblings. They had taken her through the entire film of Pink Floyd's The Wall. "This movie is crazy," she said to me. So I got on my sleeping bag and I got ready, and she began to tell me about it. And as she told me about it, I could see the movie playing right before my eyes. You know, she said it opens on a hotel hallway, and there's this door at the far end, and we're moving really slowly down the hallway, closer and closer to the door, and then suddenly, chicken game, chicken game, Jane. The door opens, and the music slams in, and the movie starts. And I was just completely in awe of giggly Jessica. And as she told to me, I could see the rock star with the towering cigarette ashes, and I could see the young troubled boy who was haunted by the legacy of his bloody dead father. And then there were these animated fat women with big lips, and the lips turned into vaginas, and then there were these blossoms, and the blossoms also turned into vaginas, and then all the vaginas were eating the men like this, and then the rock star turned into Hitler, but with no eyebrows, and he was preaching to these marching hammers that were going in a row, and then there were these children, and they were on a conveyor belt, but they didn't have faces. They had these masks like zombies, and they were marching, and then they would topple over and fall into this meat grinder and be pounded out the other side with this pink meat. And then the wall was high, and it started to crumble just a little bit, and everything got really quiet, and the rock star who had no eyebrows, and he was trying to, and on all of a sudden, chicken, bread, chicken, ding, 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 and the wall started falling down everywhere, and then the rock star was in this pool of his own blood, and he was just floating there. Well, I was fixated and horrified and intimidated and fascinated and so impressed with giggly Jessica. I mean, she was so experienced and so grown up and so lucky to be able to spend every summer in this most exotic place, South Bend, Indiana. I mean, New York City had nothing on South Bend, Indiana, you know. Jessica really showed me a whole new world that I had not known about. And I lay back, when she was done, I lay back on my sleeping bag, and I looked up at the sky, and a plane flew by overhead, and a taxi honked somewhere in the distance, and my whole life had changed during this ultimate sleepover. So we woke up in the morning and we stretched out of our sleeping bags, wide awake, but it was only 5:30 a.m. because we had nothing but sun over our heads. And once again, we were caught in our own scheme because we still really couldn't go home realistically for a few more hours. So we climbed back down the ladder, back down the 18 flights of stairs, and we went to a diner on 86th Street where we used a real bathroom, so that was refreshing. And even though we felt like these badass grown-ups. We still only had the pocket change of a 13-year-old. So we bought 2 hot chocolates and 1 corn muffin, and we nursed that for 3 hours as we sat in the diner. And then finally it was 9 a.m. and I said goodbye to Giggly Jessica, and we went our separate ways. And I went home, and as I walked in the apartment, my father was awake, and he was in his bathrobe reading the Sunday Times and drinking coffee, and just, nonchalantly he said, "Oh, hey Sam, how was your sleepover?" And, well, I wanted to tell him that I had slept 19 stories in the air on the roof. I wanted to tell him how quickly beer makes you pee, and about my amazing orgy list that I got, and I really wanted to tell him about this mind-blowing art rock movie, The Wall, that had changed my life. But, of course, a badass can never reveal her secrets, so I just shrugged and said, it's okay. So the ultimate sleepover was just like any other night. And I walked down the long hallway and opened the door at the end into my bedroom, and I got in my own bed, and I closed my eyes, a new person in an exciting new world. Thank you.